Vader is Luke's father. That wasn't always the plan. In the original script for A New Hope, Obi-Wan tells Luke that Vader betrayed and murdered his father, Anakin Skywalker. These were two separate people. George Lucas didn't cook up the father twist until The Empire Strikes Back, which means the entire Obi-Wan explanation had to be retconned with that infamous "from a certain point of view" line in Return of the Jedi. The draft scripts from 1976 make it crystal clear. Vader was just a villain, a fallen apprentice, not the dad. But once Empire locked in the reveal, Lucas had to scramble backward and rewrite history. It worked. Audiences ate it up. But technically, the whole foundation of the original trilogy got rebuilt on the fly. That retcon didn't just change one character, it redefined the entire Skywalker bloodline and forced every piece of Star Wars media moving forward to treat Vader as Anakin. One script change, infinite consequences. Leia is Luke's sister, another swing Lucas took during Return of the Jedi to tie up loose ends fast. Back in Empire Strikes Back, Yoda drops the line, "There is another," when Luke rushes off to Cloud City. Originally, that other hope was supposed to be someone else entirely, potentially introduced in later films. But Lucas wanted to close the trilogy cleanly, so he retconned Leia into being Luke's twin sister. The problem? Luke and Leia kiss. Twice. Once in A New Hope as a good luck peck, and once in Empire as a full-on romantic move to make Han jealous. Once the sister reveal hit, fans had to live with the fact that the hero tongue-wrestled his twin without knowing it. The expanded universe tried to smooth it over by claiming the Force kept them from feeling a deeper connection, but the damage was done. Lucas himself admitted in interviews that Leia wasn't always meant to be the other Skywalker. It was a narrative shortcut that worked for the story, but left a weird stain on the canon. One quick fix: decades of awkward rewatches. Leia remembers her mother. In Return of the Jedi, Leia tells Luke she has vague memories of her real mother. She describes her as kind, but sad. That moment plays beautifully in the original trilogy. It gives Leia a connection to Padme that Luke never had. Then the prequels dropped. Revenge of the Sith shows Padme dying immediately after childbirth. She names the twins, whispers a few words, and flatlines. Leia never even opened her eyes yet. So how does she remember her mother's face? The easy answer is she doesn't. It's a retcon casualty. Some fans argue the Force gave Leia psychic flashes of Padme, or that she was sensing emotions in the womb. The Clone Wars series and other media have tried to patch it by leaning into Leia's Force sensitivity, suggesting she could access memories that technically shouldn't exist. But no matter how you spin it, the original line doesn't track. Lucas wrote the prequels without double-checking his own dialogue from 20 years earlier. One throwaway line, impossible timeline, permanent contradiction. Ahsoka Tano exists. When the Clone Wars animated series launched in 2008, it dropped a nuclear retcon into Star Wars lore. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, the guy who falls to the dark side and becomes Darth Vader, suddenly had a Padawan. Her name was Ahsoka Tano, and she was never mentioned in Revenge of the Sith. Not once. No reference, no farewell, no explanation for why Anakin's apprentice wasn't standing next to him during Order 66. For years, fans demanded answers. The show worked overtime to justify her absence, eventually creating the Siege of Mandalore arc, which put Ahsoka on a separate mission during the events of Episode 3. That timeline surgery made it technically possible for her to exist without showing up in the movie, but it's still a stretch. The bigger retcon is philosophical. Anakin wasn't just a reckless Jedi Knight anymore. He was a teacher, a mentor, someone trusted with training the next generation. That changes his character arc completely. It deepens his fall because now he's not just betraying Obi-Wan and the Order, he's betraying Ahsoka. Dave Filoni's creation became one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars, but her existence required rewriting Anakin's entire journey. One character, entire prequel era reshaped. Inhibitor chips control the clones. The original explanation for Order 66 was cold and brutal. The clone troopers were conditioned from birth to follow orders without question. When Palpatine gave the command, they executed it because that's what soldiers do. The Republic Commando novels leaned into this hard, showing clones as loyal but ultimately programmed killers. It was a tragedy rooted in military obedience. Then, the Clone Wars retconned it. Season 6 introduced inhibitor chips, organic implants hidden in every clone's brain that forced them to carry out Order 66 against their will. Suddenly, the clones weren't complicit. They were victims. The chips removed their moral agency entirely, turning them into puppets. It's a more sympathetic take, and it definitely makes the clones easier to root for during the series. But it also erases the horrifying reality that these men, who fought alongside the Jedi for years, could turn on them in an instant because duty overrode loyalty. The Bad Batch expanded on this, showing how some clones resisted or removed their chips, but the damage to the original lore was done. The chips turned Order 66 from a chilling betrayal into a mind control tragedy. One story decision, complete moral rewrite. The Death Star's weakness was sabotage. For almost 40 years, the rebels destroyed the Death Star by exploiting a random design flaw, a thermal exhaust port, 2 meters wide, that led straight to the reactor. It was treated as imperial arrogance, a classic case of overconfidence leading to catastrophic failure. Then Rogue One came along in 2016 and retconned the entire thing. The exhaust port wasn't a mistake. It was sabotage. Galen Erso, the engineer forced to build the weapon, intentionally designed the flaw and embedded the schematics in the Death Star plans so the rebels could find it. That single change transformed the original trilogy's climax from luck into purpose. Suddenly, the destruction of the Death Star wasn't just a lucky shot by a farm boy with force powers. It was the culmination of Galen's lifelong revenge plan against the Empire. Rogue One's final act, where Jyn Erso transmits the plans, retroactively justifies the entire opening crawl of A New Hope. But it also means every time someone watches the trench run now, they're watching the payoff to a movie that didn't exist until 2016. One backstory addition, 40-year-old plot hole closed. Palpatine returned somehow. The sequel trilogy's most infamous retcon, delivered with zero setup in The Rise of Skywalker's opening crawl. The dead speak. Palpatine's back, broadcasting threats across the galaxy, and nobody knows how. The film itself barely explains it. Cloning, Sith magic, dark science, secrets only the Sith knew. Pick your excuse. But the retcon runs deeper than just his survival. Palpatine's return fundamentally rewrites the Chosen One prophecy. Anakin was supposed to bring balance to the Force by killing the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. That was his redemption. The whole point of the original 6 films. By bringing Palpatine back, the sequel trilogy erased that balance. Anakin didn't end the Sith, he just delayed them. Now, new canon media is scrambling to backfill this disaster. The Bad Batch, The Mandalorian, and the novel Shadow of the Sith have all introduced Project Necromancer, a cloning operation that explains how Palpatine's consciousness survived. These stories are trying to make the retcon feel planned, but it's obvious it wasn't. Palpatine's resurrection was a narrative desperation move, and Star Wars is still cleaning up the mess. One creative decision, decades of lore destabilized. Rey is a Palpatine. The Last Jedi spent 2.5 hours hammering home that Rey was nobody. Her parents were junk traders who sold her for drinking money. She wasn't special by blood, she was special because of her choices. It was a statement against legacy worship, a middle finger to the idea that force power only mattered if you had the right last name. Then, The Rise of Skywalker walked it all back. Rey's parents weren't nobodies. Her father was a failed Palpatine clone, making her the Emperor's granddaughter. That retcon didn't just undo The Last Jedi's message, it reinforced the exact bloodline obsession Rian Johnson tried to dismantle. Fans were split. Some loved the Palpatine connection because it tied her to the Skywalker saga. Others hated it because it made her victory feel less earned, like she only mattered because of who she was related to. Either way, the retcon was clumsy. The film tried to have it both ways, saying Rey could reject her heritage and choose her own path, but the damage was done. Her entire identity got rewritten in the final act of the final film, leaving no time to process it. One last-minute reveal, entire character arc scrambled. The Sith were extinct for a millennium. Ki-Adi-Mundi says it in The Phantom Menace. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium. It's treated as fact, a cornerstone of why the Jedi Council refuses to believe Qui-Gon when he reports fighting a Sith Lord on Tatooine. Then the Acolyte rolled out in 2024 and blew that line to pieces. The show takes place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, and features multiple Sith actively operating in the galaxy, killing Jedi, manipulating events, and staying hidden from the Council. The retcon reframes Ki-Adi-Mundi's line as either arrogance or a cover-up, suggesting the Jedi knew about the Sith, but buried the truth to avoid panic. Some fans argue it's not a contradiction because the Sith were secret, so technically the Jedi didn't know they existed. But that's a stretch. The Acolyte makes it clear that at least some Jedi encountered Sith and survived to report it, meaning the knowledge existed. The show gambled on expanding Sith lore at the cost of breaking prequel dialogue, and the fandom is still fighting about whether it was worth it. One TV show, 25-year-old line contradicted. Kyber crystals bleed and purify. In the old expanded universe, lightsaber crystals were just rare minerals. Jedi found them, tuned them, and powered their sabers. Different colors existed, but they didn't carry moral weight. Then Disney Canon changed everything. Now, Kyber crystals are living Force-sensitive entities that bond with their user. When a Sith claims a crystal, they corrupt it through pain and hatred, causing it to bleed red. When a light side user cleanses a corrupted crystal, it turns white. This retcon first appeared in the Ahsoka novel and was later visualized in Tales of the Jedi. It adds a spiritual layer to lightsabers that wasn't there before, turning them into reflections of their wielder's soul rather than just weapons. It's a cool idea, and it deepens the lore significantly. But it also completely overwrites decades of established crystal mechanics from Legends. The old lore had synthetic crystals, natural color variation, and different meanings tied to Jedi philosophies. The new system is simpler but more restrictive. Every red saber now implies corruption, and every other color implies purity or balance. One storytelling choice, entire weapon mythology rewritten. The New Republic era fills the gap. Before The Mandalorian launched in 2019, there was basically nothing between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. 30 years of galactic history, almost completely unexplored. The sequel trilogy jumped straight to the First Order rising from the ashes of the Empire, but it never explained how that happened. Then Mando, Ahsoka, and other Disney Plus shows filled the void. These series introduced the concept of Imperial remnants, warlords like Moff Gideon holding onto scraps of the Empire's power, and early experiments like Project Necromancer that would eventually lead to Palpatine's return. Thrawn's reappearance in live action further retconned the timeline, positioning him as a major threat rebuilding Imperial forces in the unknown regions. This entire era is a retcon by expansion. It didn't contradict the sequels outright, but it completely reshaped the context. The First Order's sudden rise doesn't feel as random anymore because now we see the groundwork being laid years earlier. The gap got filled, but it also created a narrative dependency. The sequels now rely on shows that didn't exist when they were made to explain their own setup. One streaming initiative, decades of blank timeline rewritten. Thrawn's campaigns were erased. In the old expanded universe, Grand Admiral Thrawn was the face of the post-Return of the Jedi era. The Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn was the unofficial episodes 7, 8, 9, and 9 for an entire generation of fans. Thrawn led the Imperial Remnant, cloned Jedi, brought back the Empire's might, and nearly crushed the New Republic. Then Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012 and declared the expanded universe non-canon in 2014. Decades of novels, comics, and games gone. Thrawn's campaigns, his entire legacy, wiped out to make room for the sequel trilogy. But Star Wars couldn't let Thrawn go. Dave Filoni brought him back in Star Wars Rebels as a recurring antagonist, and later, live-action Thrawn appeared in Ahsoka. The character survived the Purge, but his story didn't. The new Thrawn is a different version, with a different history, fighting different battles. The retcon here isn't just narrative, it's existential. An entire timeline ceased to exist so a new one could take its place. Fans who grew up with Legends Thrawn had to let go of years of stories, and the character they got back wasn't quite the same. One corporate decision, entire universe declared non-canon. Even Piell and Gallia died early. In the Legends timeline, Jedi Masters. Even Piell and Gallia both survived deep into the Clone Wars and were killed during Order 66 or shortly after. Books like Jedi Twilight featured their final stands against the Empire. Then the Clone Wars TV series killed them off years earlier. Even Piell died during a prison break arc in Season 3, and Gallia was killed by Savage Opress in Season 5. These weren't minor changes. Both characters had established death scenes in the old canon, and the show just overwrote them. The decision created a rift between the animated series and the existing Legends material, forcing fans to pick which version they considered real. When Disney rebooted the canon in 2014, the TV show won. The Legends deaths were erased, and the Clone Wars versions became official. It's a small retcon in the grand scheme of Star Wars, but it highlights how aggressively the new canon was willing to overwrite the old. 2 characters, entire arcs rewritten, previous stories deleted. Palpatine's reign lasted 1,000 years or generations. In the Ewok movies, yeah, those exist. Palpatine's rule is described as lasting 1,000 years. It's a throwaway line, but it created a problem when the prequels rolled around. Revenge of the Sith shows Palpatine declaring the Empire in 19 BBY, and Return of the Jedi shows it falling in 4 ABY. That's 23 years, not 1,000. So the prequels retconned the line by recontextualizing it. The 1,000 years wasn't about Palpatine's reign as Emperor, it was about the Sith's long-term plan to destroy the Jedi, dating back to Darth Bane's Rule of Two. The Sith spent a millennium plotting in secret, manipulating the galaxy from the shadows, until Palpatine finally made his move. Later canon material like The Bad Batch reinforced this by showing early stages of Palpatine's cloning experiments and consolidation of power across eras. The retcon smoothed over the discrepancy, but it required rewriting the context of an entire historical claim. One vague line, thousand-year timeline clarified. The Clone Wars lasted 3 years, not decades. Early Star Wars media treated the Clone Wars as this mythic, ancient conflict that spanned years, maybe even decades. Obi-Wan's line in A New Hope, "For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the guardians of peace," combined with vague references in old novels, made the Clone Wars feel like a long, drawn-out galactic struggle. Then, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith condensed it. The war starts at the end of Episode 2 in 22 BBY and ends at the start of Episode 3 in 19 BBY. 3 years. That's it. The Clone Wars animated series filled in those 3 years with hundreds of episodes, turning a brief conflict into a densely packed era of storytelling. But the retcon stands. What fans imagined as a generational war became a short, brutal campaign. It changes the weight of Obi-Wan's nostalgia in A New Hope. He's not reminiscing about some distant past. He's talking about something that ended less than 2 decades ago. The Jedi fell fast, and the war that destroyed them barely lasted long enough for a single generation to fight in it. One timeline compression, decades of imagined history erased. By the way, if you enjoy this kind of deep dive, I will be posting Star Wars content regularly as you wish. You can tell me in the comments section below, and I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks. Anakin built C-3PO. Attack of the Clones introduced this retcon, and fans are still arguing about it. In A New Hope, C-3PO is just a protocol droid. No special backstory, no grand origin. He's nervous, fluent in 6 million forms of communication, and kind of useless in a fight. Then the prequels reveal that 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker built him from scrap parts on Tatooine to help his mom. It's meant to be a touching callback, showing Anakin's mechanical genius and tying the droid to the Skywalker family. But it creates a massive problem. If Anakin built 3PO and later became Darth Vader, why does Vader never recognize the droid in the original trilogy? They interact multiple times. 3PO is tortured on Cloud City, right in front of Vader, and there's zero acknowledgement. The retcon makes Anakin more important to the saga, but it also makes the original trilogy feel incomplete. Some fans argue Vader's memory was suppressed, or he just didn't care anymore. Others say Lucas didn't think it through. Either way, one prequel decision made a beloved droid's origin story feel forced. One backstory retcon, decades of emotional disconnect.